No mai haere mai ki quite simply politics. Welcome everyone back to another episode. My name's Holly, I'm your host, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with one of my favourite MPs and also someone I'm lucky to call a friend, and that is Melissa Lee from the National Party. Welcome.
Kia ora, and thank you so much. I bet you say that to all your guests.
I actually don't. You could
Don't
go
you?
back and...
Oh, okay. I feel very privileged. I feel very honoured.
I would say we're friends.
We are.
Yeah.
And I love you too.
We were having a conversation before we got here about our shoe choices.
Yeah.
Because we're both quite
Short.
little.
Yes. Yep.
Tell me about your shoe choice today.
I love the fact that it sort of has a little bit of character and it's platformed.
Yeah.
Gives me a little bit more of an advantage with height. We are both vertically challenged a little.
But I think we make up a little bit for that.
With our personality?
Right.
Loudness?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How has the political year been for you so far?
It's been a busy year. My goodness. Trying to hold the government to account for the last, almost 6 years has been quite a busy time. And I've had some success.
Yeah.
And, but my focus has actually been, for this year, it's actually been about meeting, not just constituents, but stakeholders around the country, looking at some of the issues that we need to fix when we're in government. So it's been really busy.
What are they saying?
Well, apart from, I had a public meeting last week on Friday where we had a law and order, public meeting, and I had Mark Mitchell in the electorate and talking about the issues because, Sandringham is where Janak Patel actually got killed. Lena Zhang Harap was murdered in Mount Albert as well. And there was actually a shooting, in St. Luke's as well. A teenager was shot. And, apart from that, the victimization profile is actually pretty bad. Even in Balmoral, Kingston, Mount Albert, Sandringham, Point Chevalier, Westmere, all of that is actually quite dramatic in the sense that in the last year you're talking about nearly 1,000 cases of victimization. A lot of it is actually burglary and robberies. We've had, Stuart Dawson in St. Luke's where 8 offenders actually came and did a smash and grab.
Eight
Young people in St. Luke's in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And I do a walk around and say, like Sandringham, and virtually every second shop had actually been burgled or had a ramp. Maybe I'm sort of like being a little bit more dramatic, but it's like it was one after the other that I didn't have to go very far to talk to the next victim. Yeah. So it was the Indian grocery, it was a dairy, it was the shisha shop. It wasn't even a vape shop; it was a shisha shop. It had proper shishas, and then there's the local liquor shop. I was talking to the liquor shop owner who was literally sleeping on the floor of his shop at night, away from his family, because he was so afraid.
Yeah.
That they're going to constantly do this. And not only is it a monetary loss for them, and they're seriously thinking about whether they should be in business or not because of the losses that they're actually suffering. But it's not just that. It's, the insurance cost. They can't get reinsured, when it constantly happens. And it's the trauma that they're actually sort of remembering. I've been a victim of home invasion. I remember at least 6 months where I couldn't actually go to sleep.
Yeah.
I literally every 5-10 minutes I was like walking around the house checking the windows and the locks to make sure that it was actually secure. And even now, after years and years, I still don't feel comfortable going outside at night on my own, especially if there's not a lot of people or not a lot of light. And, it's sort of the heart palpitation that actually happens when you're actually getting I need to get to the car to actually get something. And then you sort of think, oh, do I really need it?
Yeah.
I choose not to go, trying to actually be more secure. But, it is happening every time. And, when you look at the crime stats, in the last 2 years, crime has actually shot up 465%. That is just astronomical. The other day, the CEO of Foodstuff actually was talking about even in his own stores. The crime has, the retail crime has actually shot up 36%.
Yeah.
That is just massive. that's one of them.
Yeah.
One of the issues. That's one of the issues that people talk to me about. But I guess the other thing is actually cost of living.
Yeah.
Going, grocery shopping and, everything has actually gone up. And I
Yeah.
mean, people tell me, even me, I mean, I was talking about this yesterday in Parliament, that, people actually put off things that they don't need to spend money on. I mean, people used to do 6 weekly haircuts, because you want to keep a tidy look, right? I haven't had a haircut in months.
Well, it's like when you see, and I've done this too. I'll pick up something in the supermarket, look at it, look at the price, and then I'll put it back. That is not a behaviour I have ever done in my life where I've been sort of like, I'm not sure if I should or shouldn't buy that. But you see it all the time.
Well, you get the essentials, the milk and the bread, and then you sort of look at the brands. I mean, because there are certain breads that you may not like and you actually stick to a particular thing. But I mean, now I'm looking at butter, for example, and I won't buy butter unless it's at a certain price and on sale,
It's just, and you see the amount of people doing that. Like, it's a very real thing.
Yeah.
I walked out the supermarket the other day with one bag of groceries.
$120. Yep.
Exactly what I was about to say. $110.
Yep.
It's like, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, and fruit and vegetables are so expensive as well. And I mean, often one of the issues that we have is that we want fresh fruit and vegetable off season as well. And you need to always get seasoned fruit and seasoned vegetables that is actually available, and it might be cheaper that way.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it's a global trade, that we should be reliant on supply chain. And I think, with the pandemic, they're saying, the supply chain has actually been disrupted and it's the infrastructure that hasn't actually returned properly, and, everything's actually more costly. I'm thinking, no, there's inflation, I think, which is the biggest issue. Yeah.
So when you're looking ahead to the general election this year, what are you hoping?
National government.
No. What are you wanting to change when you become minister?
Well, I don't know if I'll become minister. I hope I'm a minister.
The assumption is if you become minister, you're coming minister. What would you do? What would you do differently?
Well, I currently have the portfolio of broadcasting,
Right.
and media and digital economy and communications and ethnic communities.
Yes.
And so I'm guessing that if I am given a portfolio to be a minister, those are the 3 portfolio areas that I probably will have responsibility. There might be other areas, I'm not so sure, but that will be up to the Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, to actually sort of, give to me.
Yep.
Whether he actually feel confident that I will actually be, good in particular portfolio. I'm not so sure whether he will actually offer me some others, but, you never know. But if I am privileged enough to actually hold those portfolios, I've been working quite hard, this last couple of years to engage with the stakeholders on things like rural connectivity, because I mean, city areas, most of us are connected.
Yeah.
It's the city fringe and rural areas that have major connectivity issues. Even though we are very well connected, there is still a long way to go. At least 10,000 homes in the rural area are not connected.
10,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Eh?
Yeah. At least.
It's a lot.
Yeah. And the thing is that I can't help those people who choose to be not connected, who live in the, top of the mountains. And, I'm sorry, but if you choose to live there and there's no fiber, you can't blame me.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sorry. You're going to have to find some other solution, like maybe satellite.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's technologies changing all the time, and, equipments actually get cheaper. But, I want resilient technology that people can actually rely on, and in this day and age, productivity can be attained by connectivity. And I think connectivity is one of the biggest issue that we need to resolve. And I think, the former national government, led by John Key, and with Bennett English and Stephen Joyce as the Minister for Communication, we actually delivered ultra-fast broadband, but it needed to go further. And, it's been a little slow as far as I'm concerned. And, when you have in the last couple of years, something like 22 versions of Samsung phone has actually been delivered to the world. We're still struggling to connect people when they're struggling with dial-up speeds on their internet. And, oh my God, it's like, when you make a phone call on your mobile phone and you're driving and the phone call drops off. And when you actually build, transmission gully with no concept of people needing to actually have mobile phone connectivity, we have a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you just raised something which I want to go back and touch on. Under the John Key government, that is where you and I first met, right?
That's right.
That's right. Talk to me about your time then when you were in Parliament as a member of the government, also having to keep stroppy ministerial advisors in line. Because that is how for everyone at home. That is how.
I think we had a lot of fun. I think, was I chair of commerce?
Yes.
And then we were dealing with legislation, and
Yes.
there are certain things that I wanted done, and
Yes.
you were like going no, and I'm going no, you will do it.
Legitimately one of the most amazing people to keep me on my toes. I thought, oh my God, this Wahine knows this inside out, and I have to be on top of my game.
It's like, don't bullshit me.
100%. Was there anything that you did during that time that you look back and you think, oh, that's sort of unfinished business there, or you didn't really get to put through?
There's always, a feeling that, we could have done a heck of a lot more. We did actually win the election in 2017, as in that we had the majority of votes. But, a coalition arrangement between New Zealand First and Labour meant that Labour became government and Jacinda Ardern became Prime Minister. Good for them, but not so good for us in the sense that, Bill English was a great Prime Minister, and his social investment model is something that a lot of people misunderstood. And I think only now realize that we actually need to do something about our social environment, where we need to invest in children and their families for resilience. We have so many young children, aged under 10, 8 years old even, committing crime at the moment. And I think that is, there's increases in gangs and all that. I think social investment model is something that we actually need to get back to. And I think that's an unfinished business of the former national government. And I think a lot of national members actually feel the same way.
What would you say to Winston because of the decision he
Your
made
fault?
then? Do you want to say it loud?
I think everybody knows, Winston, it was your fault, and I think you realized that you made a mistake.
What would you say to him for this coming election if you guys are in that position and he's got 5%?
Well, I hope he doesn't get to choose who becomes government, because he obviously made the wrong choice the last time.
Politics, eh? Gotta love it. Gotta love it.
If you want a national government, vote national, I say. 2 ticks below. That's all you can do. Don't give someone like Winston the decision to actually decide wrongly who becomes government.
I completely understand. When you look at what the policies you guys have got out now, which ones of them do you think are the most necessary that we need?
I think, one of the biggest issue is actually cost of living crisis. That is the economy. We need to get the economy right. And I think, to support that economy, you need to get infrastructure right. So there are major policies that National Party has actually put out, as well as putting out as we actually get closer to the election time. But the other aspect is education. Our young children need to be educated. The very fact that our children can't read, write, or do maths is a problem. Yeah. And, lots of people, the Labour government would actually like to say, oh, it's because these kids, they've had, previous national government and, this is the result. I'm sorry, it's prime. We're talking about, early childhood education, primary school children, growing up in the intermediate and secondary school, currently who are not able to do that. Yeah. And I think we need to focus on their education, make sure that they can read, they can write, they can do maths, focus on those before we actually do anything else.
Do you think that we take education for granted somewhat? Like that we expect people to
It's very different to the kind of education that I had in Korea. I grew up in, I'm slightly older than you. So says the woman who told her she could call me auntie. I grew up in Korea initially. I was born in Korea and raised there. I attended primary school, never graduated from primary school because my parents actually uprooted me to move me to Malaysia. In Korea, I mean, my classroom, there were 65 children.
65?
And there would be around 10 classrooms on each level. It's massive school.
And one teacher for 65?
65 kids in
So you
primary
couldn't.
school.
So how? What
You
was that
sat
like?
in a row, and I was the shortest kid, and I campaigned to be class president.
And
I was
Hey.
elected. Yes. Primary, grade 1. Yeah. So I got political quite early.
yeah.
But there are rules, and you know what? In Korea, at the end of the school day, the kids actually polished the floors. We didn't need a cleaner in the school to clean our classrooms.
Yeah.
Kids actually did it ourselves.
Is it
Teachers and kids.
Is it the discipline element or the pride in your surroundings?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. And then, when I was a school prefect, at school, class monitor and president and all that, you actually have a little, badge saying that you are. And then often when you have to sort of stand outside by the gate, and if there are anybody who comes to school late, the punishment is you need to pick up rubbish along the way to your classroom.
Really? I quite like that. Take some responsibility.
Do stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So, and it's quite different. And the thing is, it's like, you get taught. I mean, I remember, I still can't do multiplication table in English because
Really?
it was drummed into me. It was done as a song. So we would do 2는 2, 2는 4, 2, 3은 6, 2, 4, 8. Do you know what I mean? That's So you do the multiplication table in a song, and even now I can't do it in English.
So you do it in Korean.
I have to. If somebody says what, I have to do it in Korean. Don't test me. You were gonna do it. Don't do it.
Okay. Called out. Not gonna do it. What was your favorite subject? Out of interest.
When? In primary school?
Yeah.
In primary school, I guess I was a writer. I wrote a lot.
Did you have a campaign platform that you campaigned on when you were running for class president?
In primary school, grade 1, I can't remember.
Come on, surely.
I can't remember, but I do remember raiding my father's desk and actually bribing my friends. That I will be the best president you would ever find. I'll make sure I represent you. Make sure that you had a voice.
Yeah. When did you move to Aotearoa, New Zealand? When did you come
1988. I'm showing my age.
1988. What massive...
I wish I could tell you I was 10, but I wasn't.
You can tell me. Okay. Massive lifestyle change? Or no, not at all?
No, because my parents actually raised us from Korea to actually move to Malaysia.
Yeah.
And in Malaysia, we had the most amazing experience where my father would actually take us to bush and actually, take us to the orangutan sanctuary.
Yeah.
We sleep on the longhouses, bathe in the river, get eaten alive by the leeches.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah, well...
That's disgusting.
No, but you cross the river to actually get to the orangutan sanctuary, and then you sort of take off your boots and you realize that, your legs filled with leeches that are fat. And you're like going, Dad, 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 and he will actually take it off me. At the time I thought they were massive, but I'm sure it wasn't that big. It was probably fat and probably that length. They were all sort of lined up because you wear long boots, like gum boots.
Yeah.
And then, you think you're safe, and then, leeches have gone in.
Do they leave marks?
They suck. Yeah, they suck your blood.
So you'd have marks and stuff?
No, I don't have marks now.
No, not now, but then
it was hurtful when Dad took it off.
Yeah, that sounds...
Yeah, no, so,
okay.
yeah.
Great
like
news,
that.
anyway. So.
Yeah, and then it was amazing childhood growing up. And actually, I think one of the things that I experienced in Malaysia was that it's such a multicultural country, even though they don't actually force multiculturalism there. But, between the Malay, the Chinese and Indian, the three most populous culture and identity, they, the Malays are mostly Muslim, and so they have Hari Raya, which is like Eid al-Fitr, And then they have an open home, and their Chinese and Indian friends will actually come
that's
over
cool.
for food.
Yeah, that's
The
cool.
Chinese people will have Moon Festival or the New Year, and they'll have all their Muslim and Indian friends come over. And then, the Indians actually have things like, Diwali and Navratri, and all of their Muslim and, Malay and Chinese friends come over. So it's like open homes everywhere.
Yeah, that's really
And
cool.
then so we, the Korean people, we would also sort of join in and sort of do all of that. So in every sentence you hear Bahasa and, Tamil or Hindi and Chinese, and people, this is how Malaysian people spoke.
Yeah. Dynamic, different.
Yeah, but that was,
and embraced.
yeah, but everybody spoke English.
yeah,
English was the main sort of, but at a particular juncture, the time that I was actually there, the Malaysian government actually had decided that the language of instruction was to be Malay.
Okay.
And my parents decided that maybe that wasn't the best idea for us.
Why was that?
Even though Bahasa Malaysia is actually spoken in Malaysia and Indonesia, you can't really have a global outlook without the English language. So they
Right.
decided that we needed to be instructed in English. So my parents moved us to an English-speaking school, an international school, and I think that's when I really got to learn English, which was, I think I was how old was I? In third form.
Yeah. And then you came.
And then after that, I went to Australia.
Oh, you went to Australia?
Yeah. Before coming to Aotearoa. So
Talk to me more about that, because there's something I didn't know about you, and I'm now thinking, okay.
So I went to Australia. I did high school and university, and I went to Melbourne, and it was quite an experience.
Like New Zealand, like Australia? Which one?
Which one do I like?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely New Zealand.
Okay, good.
Gosh,
Just
no.
making sure.
When I first arrived in New Zealand, I hated it.
Oh, really?
I did.
Why?
Because I was so used to Melbourne, and I had all my friends there. And, when Mum and Dad decided that New Zealand was the place that we wanted to settle, because they came for a visit to Australia and they hated it. And they said, we're moving to after they came for visits to New Zealand, and they absolutely fell in love. And they typical Asian parents, they basically said, you're moving. And I'm like, why? It's like, because we're moving. And why? It's like, we love it. You are moving.
That's the reason. That's
why.
That's
it. It's sort of like typical Korean thing. Unmarried, so I don't have a family apart from Mum and Dad and my brother, my younger brother. And so my brother he just finished high school. He literally had to come over and actually start at Auckland University and study. And then I was still at university, and Mum and Dad said, you're moving. Okay.
And you moved.
And I had no choice.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I hated it. It was like, oh, God, I don't have any friends. I know nobody here. It's like, where is New Zealand? It's like so far away.
Yeah.
But then I think within 6 months of arriving here, I was like, I was driving back from work and looked across the harbour. And I saw this most spectacular sunset, and I think it took about a 6 month sort of period for me to fall in love.
And then it started clicking.
It sort of clicked and said, "Oh, this is home."
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
One of the things that I read about you was that while you were working in journalism, because that's your career before you went into politics, and I do want to talk about that a little bit more as well, because for everyone listening and watching, as I started to get more proactive in the media, I got some really good advice from Melissa in terms of the level of my laugh, my talking points, things like that are fundamental to know how to engage, which is one of the reasons why I do lean away from my mic every time I laugh, and knowing how to present. And so these are all integral parts. But one of the things that I saw was that you do your job, you do your mahi, and then you'd go and work in the family store. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what happened. I mean, that's what happens in most ethnic communities, most migrant families. And the thing is, it's like, when I first got to New Zealand, I was unemployed. My parents had established a shop by then.
Yeah.
On Grafton Road, actually Park Road in Grafton. There's still a sign saying sold trading house, which is now a dairy. But Mum and Dad established it. They took two shop fronts, and it actually ran as a dairy in the front, but it also ran as an import and export business at the back. in the back office where we were actually securing New Zealand goods to export overseas and securing Korean. We were the ones who were importing Korean groceries, all of the instant noodles and everything.
Really?
All of the instant noodles that you now see at Countdown everywhere else, all that is actually Korean. I was responsible for doing all of the paperwork to get it tested at, MPI for, and all of that to make sure that it didn't have salmonella issues.
Yeah.
Every time it went for a check, I think every time it went for a test, I think it cost something like $3,000.
Back then?
Yeah, we were the pioneers. So it cost a lot of money initially, and that's what happened. So every time you add a new new brand of instant noodle that hasn't actually, you need to go through the same process and all that sort of stuff. So it was one of those. And so typical of Asian families, my parents, are quite conservative, and you were raised that way. So I'm the firstborn, and usually the firstborn gets to be the responsible one.
Yeah.
And so I was working as a newspaper reporter at News Media Auckland, working for Sunday News. And when 5:00 hits and everybody goes to the pub, I have to get home to my parents' shop. And so I can relieve mum and dad's because they were open at 6:00 in the morning and close at 11:00. So I would come home to mum and dad's shop, my parents' shop, and I will relieve them so that I'm doing the restocking, cleaning, whatever, serving customers while mum and dad have a rest.
Do you think that's where your work ethic comes from? Because you got a really high work ethic.
I think it's but by example. I think my parents have always been very hardworking people. They had a different career in Korea to in Malaysia and New Zealand. I think when they become migrants, they can't sort of practice their profession because whether it's actually a limitation of English or the opportunity to work in the same field that they used to, they make do. I mean, my parents invested in aquaculture farm and it failed, and they invested in furniture business and it failed. They've done lots of things that have actually failed and succeeded. And, I've learned to grow up with both the failures and, successes. And I've been at the thick of it, I remember sending telexes, for orders.
Okay.
Telex. No, orders. Different technology. I'm showing my age.
There's only two people I've ever heard use that word in my life, and there's my mama and my papa.
Yeah, now Auntie's using it.
What is a telex?
It's before internet, darling.
Oh, imagine a time without internet.
Let's just wipe the telex reference. It's like a telecommunication device where you actually, it's like a fax machine, which we don't use anymore.
I know a fax.
Yeah,
I know that.
it's like that. Yeah. Fax actually came after the telex.
I'm all on board with the fax. I understand that. So tell me about your career in journalism, because you actually had, you saw a lot of success. And I feel like people know you as Melissa Lee, the politician, but they don't really know about your journalism career, which took you all sorts of places.
Do you know there's still people who actually hear my voice and this is
really,
that's Melissa. Yeah, because I mean they hear me. I think my voice is slightly different on a microphone to when I'm actually speaking, live.
Yeah.
And people have heard me on television, and in the mornings, when I've appeared on television, and I think people still remember. There are some people who still remember. Even our Auckland Central candidate actually remembers me from television days.
Really?
He grew up watching me, he told me, and I told him he was going to be in trouble for aging me.
How did your career in journalism influence your political career? Did it at all? Is there crossover?
Yeah, there is actually a crossover in the sense that, for like the first 5 years of my career as a journalist, I was with newspaper, and, that was all about news and, tabloid and all that sort of stuff, chasing, things that, there used to be, my former editor used to say, if it bleeds, it leads, right? That kind of stuff.
Ooh, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah, well, like there's a helicopter crash that will lead. yeah, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then moved on to television, and I was really fascinated with TVNZ's move to do a show about Asian people in New Zealand, because that was back in 1994, and that was at the stage where there was an influx of Asian people coming into New Zealand. I mean, we actually moved to New Zealand and settled permanently in 1988, but we got our residency in 87. And but then we were early pioneers, and then sort of like from Korea, for example, early 90s was when it was actually all sort of happening, and lots of Chinese were actually coming as well. And in 1994, TVNZ decided to start a new television program called Asia Dynamic, and one of my newspaper journalists, friend, colleague, mentor, actually told me, you should go apply for this. I looked at it and I said, hello, I don't have a television face.
What? How was that the first thing that you thought?
Well, back then you don't actually see people of diversity on television. Most people were white, blonde, and they spoke very proper with no accent. I'm
not familiar with the speaking proper, but okay.
Yeah. And I mean, we're talking about back in early 90s where there wasn't the diversity on our television screens. And I think I was the first Asian presenter on TV1. Yeah, on television.
It's crazy. Well, that was when was it?
1994.
Yeah. You think about that as a concept now.
It's now.
You can't even.
Hello, 1994 is like almost 30 years ago. I can't believe it's almost 30 years ago.
I was 4.
Shut up.
No, but the point being is that's such an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Right?
So 1994, that's when I first started presenting television. And then after 2 years, I decided that I didn't want to just present a show that was sort of an window into the lives of the Asian people. I wanted something a little bit more gritty. I wanted to actually sort of, do documentaries within the program. I wanted to actually tackle some of the harder issues, whether it's actually about, domestic violence that was happening within Asian people, because they were, because of the settlement issues, the stress of not being able to find a job, the respect that the fathers were not actually getting because they didn't actually have the, status that they used to have, and they're now, working in much lower sort of kind of a job, apparently. So there were, and we wanted to tackle those kinds of issues. And so I in a way, I suppose I went in competition with TVNZ and I got the contract to do the program. I sort of bid for it without thinking I'll get it.
Yeah. And then got it.
And I got it. Yeah. And all of a sudden, we were having to form a company and start producing television.
So there's also like an entrepreneurial part to that, right?
Yeah, accidental in a way. But I guess there is a sort of a bone in there, a bone of like, entrepreneurship, because my mum and dad were always entrepreneurial. And so we went into, I set up a production company with a business partner, and we were producing television shows right up till I went into Parliament. And I was both presenter, director, producer, and award-winning documentary maker.
Award-winning, eh?
And then, I mean, the companies, we did really well, and also, I think we were pioneers, and I don't think there's another one like us, actually. I mean, even though we started almost 30 years ago, there isn't actually a serious television program or anywhere about Asian people in New Zealand. I think we tackle some of the hard issues, like, some of the amazing documentaries were about, New Zealand Chinese community, who actually first Chinese came into New Zealand in 1943, 47. And Apu Hock Ton. His name is Apu Hock Ting, but he's known as Apu Hock Ton. Sort of anglicized the name.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Well, that's happened to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, there is, like Choi Siu Hoi. His surname is Choi because Asian people use their surnames in the front. But the descendants' surnames Siuhoi.
Oh, yeah,
So
'cause
they got the first name of their, ancestor.
it's
5 generations later,
yeah.
all of their family have their ancestors' great great grandfather's first name as their surname.
There'll be so many stories
Yeah, like that.
that need to be shared.
Yeah, I
right?
know. So we have done a lot of stories, documentary style about, the first gold mining, kind of business, people who had actually come talking to their descendants, chasing the stories about, Chu Chong was one of my favorites. I guess, there are many favorites, but Chu Chong was one that I personally went and looked up. And, his descendants, I ran into a descendant who was blonde. She had a Chinese tattoo on her ankle right there. And I thought, what's that? She said, oh, that's the name of my great 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 grandfather. I said, who's that? I don't read Chinese. Chu Chong. I said, oh my God, are you Chu Chong's descendant? It was like, oh my God. I was so excited. She said, yeah, how do you know Chu Chong? I said, because I've been researching about him. How amazing he was is that, he
Yeah, what
initially
did Chu Chong do?
initially he actually came for the gold and he was a bit of an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
but he moved to the Taranaki, and literally what he did was during the Depression he managed to give Maori people money through work that he was exporting wood ear mushrooms
Oh.
to China.
Oh.
So Maori community
Yep.
who didn't really have an income
Yep.
at the time, it was Depression, everyone was actually struggling.
Yep.
So he managed to actually get them to find wood ear mushrooms and supply him.
Yep.
And he gave them the payments.
Yep.
And they had a job.
And then he
And
could go
he
export.
basically exported it. Yeah. I
That's
know.
amazing.
I know, right?
Oh my
I know.
gosh.
So we were doing these and he was so entrepreneurial that he actually thought of an idea. Why do we not export butter? Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. He was the first person who exported butter to the UK. The fact that by the time it actually got to the UK, you couldn't actually eat it.
Is another thing.
But he thought of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's a pioneer in the dairy industry.
Wow. And she had the tattoo. So
Yeah, she had the tattoo. So the descendants actually decided that they wanted to, sort of honor their ancestor Chu Chong, and had his surname on
that
the
is
inside of the ankle.
very cool.
I know, and she was blonde.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm blonde, but not naturally. So one of the things too, so you just mentioned Taranaki. Beautiful pronunciation. When I was watching your maiden speech that you gave in 2008 when you entered Parliament, you actually did a mihi.
I did.
Can you tell me about that? Because that was in 2008. Now, mihi is quite normal now. It's quite regular. You see it all the time. But you did it in 2008. And for me, I don't think that would have been the norm. Talk to me about why you chose to do it.
I wanted to acknowledge the fact that, I'm in a country where there is tangata whenua, and my Korean culture is quite similar in the sense of respecting our ancestors, our ancestral roots, respecting our land. One of the first things that you would actually see Korean people when they've been away from Korea for a long time is actually land, and they kiss the ground.
Really?
Yeah, that's one of the things. They actually attach to the whenua. The earth is actually so valuable to them. And the mountains, after the Japanese occupation, the mountains were bare, and so they ended up planting Korean plants. When the Japanese were there, they pulled out. It's not a reflection on the Japanese. It's actually about Korean people. It's just that, when people come to our country and actually put their country's cherry blossoms, when we actually get our land back, we actually want to replace it with our cherry blossoms, which is quite different. And that's what's happened. And I think I wanted to acknowledge tangata whenua, even though my pronunciation wasn't as great back in 2008. I hope my pronunciation is actually better now.
You said that, but it's actually a really good go. Like I could understand what you were saying without the translation, and I thought, it was just resonance of it back in 2008 to be doing
Yeah.
that.
Well, I wanted to sort of talk about my journey to New Zealand, Aotearoa, and actually sort of link it to the journey of, tangata whenua from
Yeah.
Hawaii on a waka. And I also arrived in a waka, just had wings.
The waka rererangi.
Yeah.
I thought that was really, really cool, and it was also quite. Can you tell me about the dress that you were wearing? Like, because you were in traditional.
I was wearing my traditional hanbok. Yeah.
What's the journey behind that? Like, what?
Well, I wanted to, I'm speaking in English. I sort of, mihi and te reo Māori, but I'm Korean, and I'm very proud of being a Korean. But I'm Korean Kiwi. I've lived in New Zealand the longest. I've only lived in my country of birth till I was 10 years old.
And first ever
Korean woman
outside of
Korea to be a member of parliament. Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
I didn't know.
Oh!
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I thought, I knew I was the first Korean person to become a member of parliament in New Zealand.
Yeah.
But I had no idea that I was first Korean woman to have become a member of our parliament outside of Korea.
Yeah.
And the Korean embassy told me that.
No.
Yeah, I was like, really? I was like,
oh my God.
I was like, pretty cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Did you get lots of messages from the community?
I did. I'm like, when I became a member of parliament, I had messages from all over the world, from Korean people around the world, because the Korean, news media basically, travels the world. And, in 2008, not as much as it is now.
Yeah.
K-pop, K-movie, K-drama, everything goes around the world now.
Yeah.
But back in 2008, not so much. But I had so many messages of congratulations from around the world. And I think it's sort of like, we all whakapapa back to Korea,
That's so cool. I love that.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I've had amazing relationship with the Korean war veterans. And when I say Korean war veterans, I'm not talking about Korean people. I'm talking about Kiwis who actually went to Korea in 1950 and served there till 1955. The war was signed in an armistice in 1953, but there were thousands of New Zealand, Army and Navy personnel who actually went there to fight the battle. And, I'm losing many of them, most of them now. There aren't as many who are alive, but I've had really close relationship with them. And it was an absolute honor to have actually traveled back to Korea with Prime Minister John Key for the ceasefire commemoration in 2013.
So 2013. So
that was the 60th anniversary of the ceasefire commemoration.
So this year will be the
70th of ceasefire commemoration.
Is there any acknowledgement happening, or are you going to go back?
I have no idea. I guess there will be a Labour government minister who will travel back. I haven't had an invitation, so I'll miss out, I guess.
Somebody listening, sort that out, please.
Who's the Minister for Veterans Affairs? It was.
I should know this. Oh my God.
It was somebody we both knew, but she no longer holds the portfolio.
Oh,
Mika Whaitiri was the Minister for Veterans.
Whaitiri.
Yeah,
of course she was, and she's not.
And she's yeah.
Well,
and she would have invited me too, I think.
Yeah. So if we think about politics now, because one of the things that you're well known for, well, I understand you're well known for, is getting scalps.
Getting scalps, really?
Getting scalps. So one of the most famous ones was Claire Curran's in 2018 around a meeting with Carol Hirschfeld, which was apparently a chance meeting and then turned out not to be a chance meeting. What have you got in the pipeline? Any more aims for any more scalps?
Well, I managed to stop the RNZ TVNZ merger, so I'm very happy about that. Which I thought, I know Willie Jackson actually really loves the idea, but I think it's just, in a cost of living crisis, it was just ridiculous idea to spend that kind of money. And he couldn't explain to anybody as to what it was going to achieve that TVNZ and RNZ already do anyway. More than what it already does. Yeah.
So looking forward, where are we are there going to be any more on the horizon, or are you just letting them give their own scalps? because we saw
Well-
Michael Wood hasn't had a great week this week.
Well,
you know,
I think
so-
it's like you don't really necessarily need to help them. They seem to be doing quite well on their own to actually sort of, scalp themselves, really. I don't know. It just seems ridiculous. With Michael Wood, it's like if you get told 12 times by the Cabinet Office to actually sell your shares and you tell the Prime Minister's office that you've sold your shares, I think you should have, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember with Cabinet Office, every time they asked me to do something, it was done like that because they don't muck around.
Maybe we had different kind of leadership back then.
Cabinet Office would be like, okay, we need this thing done. You need to get it done. I'd be like, okay, yes,
Yeah.
Cabinet Office.
That's what I remember. When a minister and the Prime Minister says something, you literally get it done like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, it hasn't happened. 12 times, being told to do something and not happen. Hello.
Yeah. So looking.
Gentinetti.
Oh well, hey, I'm not.
That's an embarrassment.
I'm not too caught up on that in terms of the Privileges Committee hearing because I did want to tune in, but I didn't see it. But what are your thoughts on that? Because that's the first Privileges Committee complaint hearing since 2008 from memory. And the last one was Winston Peters. So
Well, I don't think I can actually comment on the process because that is not for me to actually say. But I mean, I did watch some of it, and I just feel that the viewers would have actually sat there going, "Oh my God,"
right.
because she literally was, I'm sorry, she's a nice woman, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I just think she's completely incompetent when she actually says, "Oh, I didn't read that. Oh, I didn't see that, and so I didn't know that it was actually happening." And when you actually say, you've actually got a set of data which was supposed to have actually been released, but you hold it off. We'll do it after I actually make the policy announcement. There has to be some reason why you do that. And when you actually, say that, I didn't know. I didn't know that my staff actually had that. Come on.
How would you answer that? Or would you just not do it in the
I'm
first
sorry. I smell BS.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you don't throw your staff under the bus. You take responsibility as the minister. If you don't read the papers, if you're not actually up to scratch with your portfolio, perhaps you should leave.
That is one thing I'll say. My worst ever faux pas as an advisor was that I had signed out an OAA incorrectly. And my minister, and my minister at the time backed me 100% and said, we'll sort it out, we'll handle it. And
that's so cool.
it was one of the times where I thought, okay,
you learn heaps that way.
Yeah.
You know that your minister had your 6, just like you have your minister's 6.
I was so distraught. I thought, right, this is it, done. And it's the experience in politics to have your back and be like, this is not a big issue, I'll sort it out this way.
You're a team.
Yeah.
You work together. You don't actually sort of say you've actually cocked up and you actually say, oh, it was my team's fault.
Like, I knew, and I was so, and I remember at the time saying to the SBS, I really have to apologise. And they're like, go apologise. And he was just like, you don't need to apologise. We deal with these things, You just think, and then never made that mistake ever again.
It's a learning. Yeah, that's what happens, yeah.
We're coming to the end.
Oh, really? That fast?
Yes, that fast. Well, hey, look, we've been going for 40 minutes, 40 odd minutes. Yeah. So,
I didn't realise.
Well, it's just like we're having a catch up.
Time just flies when you're having fun.
There's one of the things that I do I'm always interested in is what would you say to younger people thinking about getting into politics or interested in politics? Because, it's
As in being an MP?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I would actually say I have absolutely loved every minute of being an MP, and I continue to do so. And until I hate it, I will be in it. And I'm sure it will come a day where I sort of go, I'm sure I could do something else. Yeah. And, but the advice that I would actually give young people is go and live life.
Right.
Go and have a career. Life, having real life experience, whether it's actually work, commercial experience or, NGO experience, but having experience actually give a better perspective in policy development, I think. And when you're actually speaking in Parliament, you need to draw on your experience. And I think that's probably the most important thing because you've experienced how certain things impact on people. And, you talked about earlier, how did, the cross-sectional sort of crossover between my journalism and politics is that because I've experienced journalism, I've gone out and actually done stories about how people are impacted by certain things. Yeah. And you actually write or do, television programs to highlight these issues and realize that there are blockages in the pipeline or in legislation or in regulation. And you sort of go, okay, well, these are some of the things that I need to go fix. Yeah. And when you're in politics, you actually try and actually fix that problem, and I think having that real life experience is probably, I think, the best armory that you can actually have for politics. Because
real life experience.
Yeah, I think that's, you need to experience life.
Is there a cutoff age though?
No. I don't. I don't. As in, like, age was as in like how old or how young you need to be. Well, I would hate for really young people to get into Parliament because I think it can be a really hard place for young people.
It's so hard, It's not what everyone, like, that was my perspective as a staffer. It's not what people see on TV.
It's long, hard. Yeah.
What about at the other end?
Yeah, I think. I can't speak for anybody else because I think, it's up to everybody. I think there are members who've actually been there for a very long time, and there are people who've only been there a short time. I think the average stay is like less than 2 terms, right?
Is it?
I think so. I think it's about 2 terms.
Wow.
Yeah, I think so. For every MP that actually comes into Parliament, I think that's what I heard the last time. I think correct me if I'm wrong. You'll have to come back to me. You have to go and do some research. I haven't done the research, but I'm sort of remembering what somebody told me. But, I think for me, it's like, it's like anything else in my life. I've moved from, I was at a newspaper for 5 years before I moved to television. I absolutely loved what I did at TVNZ, but I was, I was only employed at TVNZ for 2 years. But after that, I contracted back to TVNZ from my own production company.
Yeah. Yep.
And, from 1996, at the end of 1995 till I went into Parliament, I was actually presenting and directing and producing. And then after that, I maintained my company. I hired somebody to actually run it for me for several years later. And eventually it just got too hard to actually manage a company as well as, being an MP. So I closed it down.
Yeah.
But, loved every moment of it. But I knew the time was right for me to actually leave. It's like making a transition. I think, this is my 5th term as a member of Parliament, as a government backbencher, select committee chair, parliamentary private secretary of ethnic communities. I've had quite a few different experiences, but I haven't been a cabinet minister, so I'm looking forward to becoming one. And then that will be amazing. And that will make me more busy and more focused on some of the things that I actually want to achieve for New Zealand and hopefully retire smiling. Looking for the next adventure.
No, and then becoming, telling me how I need to improve my interviewing skills, things like that.
I think you do a great job. But, there are some pointers that I will actually leave you with when I leave here.
Good. I like that. One of the things that we do with every guest is we give them the opportunity to do the bowl of bravery. So for everyone who's watched and listened in to these episodes, they have had just white colours in them of the questions, but we've now got a whole range of colours because the questions were coming a little bit too easy. So the idea of the bowl of bravery is that you ask, you pull out a question and answer it, but you don't know what's in there. So we've added a whole lot more. The question is, do you want to pull a question from the bowl of bravery?
Sure.
Okay. So what we're going to do is you'll pull out a question, read it, and then go
answer it.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to pull out a purple because that's my son's favourite colour.
Nice. My favourite colour too.
Sorry. I'm old. She's laughing at me. If you could share a meal with any 4 individuals, living or dead, who would they be? Ooh. That's a hard one. There's so many people. Gosh.
Well, at first...
Margaret Thatcher will be one.
Okay.
Um, dearly departed Queen Elizabeth.
Right.
Who else? King Sejong. I don't know. Nobody would know. But King Sejong is a great king of Korea who in the 14th century developed Korean language. Well, the language existed, but we didn't have a form of writing. We actually borrowed the Chinese script, but we spoke Korean. So he developed the Korean Hangul, the way to actually write our language in the 14th century. And he was the great king who actually developed that language. Wow. And he was so focused on science and everything else. And he wanted Korea to become a nation that actually looked after people, because only the educated and rich could actually write Chinese, and the common people couldn't write their own language. So he wanted everyone to learn Korean. And so great king Sejong will be the other.
Oh yeah. And then what about your fourth one?
The fourth one is my grandpa, my harabaji, who is my father's father. And I just think it's because he passed away so early, and I have memory of him tying. I as a baby, toddler, I have memory going right back to, I think I might only have been like 2 years old, or 3 years old, and he tied a rubber band rope to his chair, and he held it so I could actually jump over it. And, I asked my mom, and I said, Mom, I said to Grandpa, like, was it my grandpa who actually played? She just was like, she said, how do you remember that? And I said to her, I said, I have no memory of actually being carried, getting on a cable car, going up a mountain, but I distinctly remember my Koro's face, and I think I must have been really, really young. And she said, how do you actually have a memory? That was like when you were like less than 2.
Wow.
And then I remember my grandpa carrying me on his back because, he came for a visit, and then we went for a long walk, and I said, Grandpa, I can't walk anymore. And he carried me all the way back home.
Grandpa's love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's so nice. Okay, and then what would you eat?
Oh, God. I don't think Queen Elizabeth would actually appreciate Korean. I don't know, but I don't know, who knows. If they had no issues, I would actually just serve like my favorite Korean dishes. Really
love it.
Yeah.
What is your favorite Korean dish?
I like bibimbap, which is like rice with lots of vegetables with Korean barbecue beef, and you mix it with Korean chili paste with sesame oil. That's one serving, but you also have other dishes. I mean, Korean, there are lots of side dishes in Korean, right?
Yeah, I gotta say, I always see your food on your Instagram. It's delicious.
You're only seeing a little tiny portion. Yeah, no. No,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, no, like I think I make a mean tteokbokki, traditional Korean way, but it's sort of how they actually served it in the palace with ribs, beef ribs, and not a lot of chili, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, on that note, we've got to start wrapping this up because I'm getting hungry. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to share this time with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Do you have a final message for everyone listening or tuning in?
Well, October 14 is election date. A couple of weeks before that, you can actually vote early. Do it early. Don't do it often. Just do it once. But vote twice. One for. Well, you only get 2 votes. One is for the party and one is for your candidate. And I won't tell you which party to vote for, but I think it's very important that you actually vote. But I'm national MP, and if you want a national government, you know what to do. 2 ticks blue.
There you go. Just like that. You know that you're a broadcaster. And on that note, everyone, that's another episode of Quite Simply Politics. Tune in next week. We'll have another guest and, again, bowl of bravery. And we'll catch you soon. Ka kite!